Well, this is the period when there is a lull when it comes to terrorist activities in Jammu and Kashmir. And many a times you would have essentially seen the army also taking a back step. Tonight on This Is Exclusive, we put out details of a proactive measure that has been taken by the Indian Army and why this is extremely significant in the backdrop of what we've always been saying, that Operation Sindoor is still continuing. What does this essentially mean? Tonight on This Is Exclusive, for the first time ever, we are putting out how exactly is the Indian Army really planning to flush out Pakistani terrorists, and does the threat still remain in places like Kishtwar and Doda? You're going to see never seen before images, videos really coming in from snow-covered areas in Jammu and Kashmir where there's been an active deployment, and more importantly, how exactly is this operation really being carried out, the winter operation? Because that's the period that we've always spoken about, that there is a lull in the activities and perhaps a backstep even taken by the Indian Army. That's not the case this winter. We're going to get you an exclusive, detailed report in a short while from now. But up first, let me take you through the headlines we're tracking at this hour. Tripura student stabbed to death in Dehradun for objecting to racial abuse. 5 accused arrested, prime accused in the case absconding. More details coming up after the headlines. Protest against suspension of Sengar's jail term continues. Several women hold protest outside Parliament seeking justice for the survivor. Congress leader Digvijay Singh praises BJP and RSS, hails power of grassroots Swayamsevak workers. Lashkar commander Saifullah Kasuri's big admission on camera. He says Pakistani government listens to Lashkar leaders like chairman and vice chairman. The winter has set in, and so is the assumption that perhaps there's going to be a lull when it comes to terrorist activities, particularly in the Jammu and Kashmir region. But that's not the case. This time, the approach that has been adopted by the Indian Army is equally different than what we have seen in the past. The period between 21st of December and January 31st happens to be the time when it is assumed that there isn't going to be an attempt that is going to be made by the terror bases in Pakistan where they're going to push the terrorists. But this time, it's a different aspect altogether. The Republic has now accessed exclusive pictures of security operations that the army has been carrying out. As the bone-chilling winter descends upon the Himalayas and the 40-day period of Chilai Kalan grips Jammu and Kashmir, sources in the defense establishment have essentially indicated that the army has intensified its counter-terrorism operations across Kishtwar and Doda districts. They are undeterred by freezing temperatures, treacherous terrain and heavy snowfall. Army units have expanded their operational reach and into higher and snowbound areas to pursue and neutralize Pakistani terrorists attempting to exploit the harsh season for concealment. Now, traditionally, the onset of Chilai Kalan, the harshest phase of Kashmir's winter that is spanning from 21st of December to 31st of January, ushers, as I have been pointing out, a temporary lull in terrorist activities. Now, the reason being, communication routes close, heavy snowfall isolates the mountain regions. Now, this time, this winter has marked a decisive shift in the operational approach of the Indian Army and the other security forces. We're going to go full frame now with this first set of images, 17 pictures that have been accessed by Republic TV, videos that we're going to play out in a short while from now. First, on your screens right now, snow-covered areas where temporary bases have also been created. The reason being is that the assessment that India has made, the intelligence agencies have made, that the attempt by the terror bases across the border appears to be still active. Contrary to the opinion that most security experts have about this particular period where they see a dip when it comes to infiltration. It seems that's not the case. The assessment, we're going to put out the details of the assessment in a short while from now, but I'm going to just play out the video right now. Take a look at this video. We're not disclosing the exact location. We're not disclosing any details of the deployment, but just to give you a sense of what exactly is the change in the operational style this time, and why it should be seen in the backdrop of what we have been talking about. Ongoing Operation Sindoor, the statement that has been made right from the Raksha Mantri to the Chief of Army Staff to all the other service chiefs who have all made this point that Operation Sindoor hasn't stopped. It is ongoing. An image that you see right now, I'm not going to go to the next breaking right now. First, I'm going to see about this particular picture. I'm going to stay full frame right now, not going out of this video that has been accessed. These are exclusive pictures. Can we just put this in to perspective right now? This is what we are calling Army's Winter March. First, I'm going to go across to our reporters on the ground. In fact, from Kishtwar and Doda, I have my reporters there. Gursimran is going to give us an assessment of what's the situation on the ground. From the national capital is my colleague, our defense correspondent, Ishan, and General Panoon is also going to join us on this, help us understand why this is different and what does this mean. First to you, Gursimran, about the current assessment. I'm going to go back again with the pictures first. Gursimran.
Yes, Shawan, if we speak of the ongoing operations, yes, there has been a shift from the winter lull to the proactive approach that the Indian Army has inducted into the winter doctrine of the forces that are operating in the hinterland. Especially with regards to the Kishtwar and the Doda, we have seen that starting from 2021, all the terrorists that have infiltrated from the international border, what the route that they have followed is from the Kathua or Samba, they head towards the Udhampur and then to the Doda district and then in the upper reaches of the Kishtwar. Because what it is that in the upper reaches, they actually find a safe haven. But this time the strategy has been changed by the joint forces, and how they are operating, they are trying to actually ensure that the terrorists are pushed away from the areas where they can get and regular help from their outground workers or their ground support network that the terror groups has in the Kishtwar as well as in the Doda district. So they have been isolated as part of the operations that Indian Army has launched, that is surveillance, sweep and surveillance. What the Indian Army is doing, that they are carrying out the intensified operations along with the Jammu and Kashmir Police, the CRPF and also the Assam Rifles. And then they are moving from area to area. They are ensuring that the places that can act as the terror basis or the hideouts for the terrorists, they are not only cleared but also secured. Many of the temporary bases have been established by the Indian Army in the places in the upper reaches. If we speak of the Chatru area, which almost used to remain without the presence of forces during the winters, during the heavy snowfall. But now what has happened, that there have been multiple temporary operating bases, the TOBs, that the Indian Army has established in these snow-clad areas. What makes this difference? The first, this actually sends fear among the terrorists that there is an active presence of the Indian Army in that area. And second is the mobilization of the troop. In case of any input is generated, the Indian Army will have the troops there on the ground along with the J&K police that can be mobilized at a much faster speed. Now coming to the night operations, they have also been intensified with active support of the thermal sensors that Indian Army has inducted into its inventory, and also the UAVs that are carrying out the round-the-clock surveillance in the areas so that the threat can be neutralized, because the presence of the Pakistani terrorists, that too Jaish-e-Mohammed's terrorists trained for the jungle warfare, that has been on the radar of the security forces. Reason being that these terrorists are not the ones those who have recently infiltrated. These are the ones those who have infiltrated way back in 2021, 22, 23, and they have a couple of years knowing this entire area. So for them, the security forces, the priority is to neutralize the old commanders that have been there, and they know the demography of the area, they know the geographical challenges, and also the locations of the hideout that are now being pinned by the security forces and cleared as part of the new winter doctrine of the Indian Army, that is surveillance, sweep and surveillance, so that they can keep an eye on the all possible hideouts that the terrorists may use to hide from the security forces. One thing that has changed, and we have seen the recent encounters in Udhampur also, that what is happening, that as soon as the bases of the terrorists are cleared by the Indian Armed Forces, the terrorists do not go to their secure bases. They move to the other area, and then the input generates, and when the forces launched the massive operations in the area. The support of the village defense groups that have been seen in the past also, where many of the VDGs, soon after getting the intel regarding the movement of the terrorists, they have informed the Indian Army and the Jammu and Kashmir police, after which many of the successful operations have also been carried out. So this is the entire Indian Army's doctrine when it comes to these winters.
I'll request you to stay on with us as I want to bring in General Panoon on this broadcast. General Panoon, thank you very much for joining us. Traditionally, it is seen that this is a period when there is going to be a lull in the activities, but it seems that the Indian Army has changed its tactics. I'm not getting into pure tactical issues here right now, but the fact of the matter is this, that if at all this is done, especially snow-covered areas that are now being targeted, and more importantly, the attempt to ensure that the terrorists remain at the higher reaches and they do not go any further. What do you really make of it in the backdrop of what the Raksha Mantri, the Chief of Army Staff and the other service chiefs have been saying, that Operation Sindoor is ongoing?
Sivan, first, of course, you said Operation Sindoor is going, and the beginning of Operation Sindoor was a terrorist activity in Pahalgam. After which, of course, two nations went to a conflict that we are all aware of. There was in the hinterland, the army in concert with the other security forces and agencies have been trying to locate the terrorists who actually caused that grave act of terrorism and cowardice in Pahalgam. And of course, few months back, there was Operation Mahadev, where some of the terrorists were neutralized, and there was some identification of their having a link with the Pahalgam operations. On the other side, when you see traditionally, during summers or even during winters, there has been a lot of support by the terrorists in the past. But in a couple of years, the tourism going up, normalcy setting in, a lot of business was happening, a lot of tourists were getting into the valley. So this is what goes against the Pakistan strategy of bleeding India with 1,000 cuts. And they were literally on the verge of saying that they cannot anymore carry out their proxy war operations, and therefore they undertook what they did, as I made a reference to. Now today, during winters, of course, whatever infiltration had to happen would have happened during summers, but these people have to sustain. Couple of times it was seen that some of the groups do exfiltrate back to Pakistan during winters because they can't sustain here. But more and more, they have been getting active support by the local residents. They would stay back, but the local support is also fading away. So what happens is that these terrorists then locate themselves in higher reaches during winters if they have to sustain, because they cannot depend on the locals. As a result, they look for winter stocking in caches on the higher reaches when the graziers come down. In the summers, the graziers go up and all the blocks are occupied by the graziers, and therefore their location becomes, it gets compromised because the locals come and give information. Thinking that the docks which would be vacated by the graziers would be occupied by them, and some amount of caches or winter stocking they would have ensured through some people who are working for them. But during winters,
I'm a little curious.
The army has started operating in a very unorthodox manner, and
Okay.
they would not only
I find this very
look at the
interesting. I find this very interesting, the word that you've used, unorthodox approach that has been adopted by the Indian Army. Now, at the cost of many accusing us, saying that why are we really talking about the operational issues of the Indian Army? I'm not talking about the operational aspect here, but I'm largely looking at the change, the manner in which the Indian Army is taking this forward. The unorthodox approach, as you're rightly pointing out, General Panoon, just from the point of curiosity here, why are we saying that this is so very different than what we have seen in the past?
See, over a period of time, you realize that when the operations are not happening, the contacts were not expected to happen during winters. But I think Indian Army encounter they're actually wherever they would be during winters, and they would be picked up with technology right from the ISR, from the space, from the drones, from the other surveillance grid that the military has established. I think there is a will to now make sure that wherever these groups could be hiding, they are going to make sure that they go from dhok to dhok, from any possibility of their having caches are destroyed. I think during winters, if they can liquidate the terrorist groups which are going to be addressed, I think they will not be able to sustain and then carry out operations further during summers. I think there is a huge shift between movement that the Indian Army would take. Otherwise, in Doda area, between Doda and Kazipur, South Kashmir, this is all high altitude area. And it's very steep, very tough, rocky, and there's hardly somewhere there is no jungle, but somewhere there is some jungle. So therefore, they will be able to segregate themselves, operate in jungles differently, operate in areas which is pure rocky mountains, operate there differently. So they would have segregated all this and taken the local support of village defense committees, because these are the people who know where the dogs are. I think this time I see a very different trend, that the local Kashmiris are very much interested in leading the army into such areas where they suspect that they could be hiding either in some kind of a natural hideout, or there is a dog, or in the forest area.
General Panu, I'll just request you to stay on with us because I'm getting in more details right now. In fact, another breaking news now coming in with regards to the assessment that has been made. Now, in fact, as far as this assessment goes, this is an assessment that has been made by various intelligence agencies that have been working. There are approximately 30 to 35 Pakistani terrorists currently in the Jammu region. Now, inputs that have been gathered over the past few months suggest that these Pakistani terrorist groups, finding themselves cornered by successful counter-terror operations, have shifted deeper into higher and middle mountain reaches of the region, areas that are now devoid of any sort of habitation. These terrorists are believed to be seeking temporary winter hideouts to evade detection and avoid direct confrontation with the security troops. Reports are also indicating that these remnants of terror groups are attempting to coerce, threaten local villagers for shelter and food supplies, though their support among the locals and overground workers has sharply declined. Now, this has a direct impact because the drying local support and continuous security vigilance at lower altitudes have basically forced them into isolation, further restricting their ability to regroup or even plan coordinated attacks. Let me go across to our defense correspondent and my colleague. I'm going to go back to the next breaking in a short while from now, but let me just get a quick word from Gursimran, and then I'll go back to Ishan. Gursimran, the assessment that has come in from our sources within the intelligence agencies, 30 to 35 active Pakistani terrorists right now. But again, that brings in the question that is there a problem that has come up, particularly given the fact that there is a large push that has been made by the Pakistani establishment to ensure that the infiltration still continues, because there was a time when one would have seen there would have been a sharp decline as far as infiltration attempts are concerned. Are you seeing, as someone on the ground, that there is an uptick as far as the infiltration attempts are concerned?
Sishavan, that's very true, and especially on the international border, this is a serious concern. Reason being that for the last more than a couple of years, we have seen large-scale infiltration taking place, and there was a decision that was taken by the BSF when we saw that the DG BSF was changed and also the special DG BSF was changed, because at that given time, the intelligence input suggested that 5 to 6 groups of the Jaish-e-Mohammed terrorists, they have sneaked in from the Pathankot, from the Kathua and from Samba, and after that, there was realignment of the border duties that were done to the Jammu frontier of the BSF as well after the infiltration attempts that were made from across the border, and many of them, as per the intelligences, they were successful. Now coming to the number 30 to 35 is the number. This is roughly 7 to 9 groups of Jaish-e-Mohammed that have infiltrated in last couple of years, and all of them have gone to Doda, Kishtwar, and some of them are operating in the Udhampur. In the Kishtwar, it is said to be 3 to 4 groups, majority of the groups in the area of the Kishtwar's Kuntwara, where they have carried out the ISIS style beheading last year, and also also in the nearby area of the Keshwan forest, that Baul has presence of two groups, because there have been Thoraya intercepts that have been done by the security forces. Now coming to this side of the Kishtwar, also 1 to 2 groups are. So total number of 4 groups are roughly believed to be in the Kishtwar. 2 to 3 groups in the upper reaches of the Doda district. They are believed to be active in the Thartri area, in the Gando area, where a group of Jaish of 3 terrorists was neutralized. And now in the Udhampur also there is a presence of group. Shaban.
Thank you very much, Gursimran. I'll request you to stay on with us. I'm going to take another breaking news now coming in. As far as the focus that we're essentially looking at, the principal focus for the army and other forces this winter is basically twofold: to eliminate the remaining terrorist pockets within the known areas and to ensure that terrorists remain confined to inhospitable higher reaches. Now, this containment strategy not only prevents terrorists from infiltrating or regrouping in the populated belts, but also significantly disrupts their logistics and communication channels, reducing any sort of operational capability. Let me bring in my colleague, our defense correspondent Ishan, joining us on this broadcast. There is a change in the approach, as we have been pointing out, and this, many would say, a radical change. Help us understand this, Ishan. What exactly is the approach that has been adopted by the Indian Army?
Shavan, normally what we see is that during this extreme winter season, we reduce our troop presence, and we also and the terrorist activity is also reduced because the inoperability of the region and the hostile nature of this region. But this time the Indian Army has increased its presence and has used technology, specifically IR cameras, ground-based sensors, and most importantly loitering drones, to ensure and find out these terrorists. Now the region of Doda and Kishtwar lies in a very strategic region, that is between the valleys of Pir Panjal and Chenab. Now this region is normally being used for transiting between across the border and back into the Indian side. So this time Indian Army has increased its presence and is ensuring and keeping up the pressure on the terrorists so that they do not get a chance to regroup and they do not get a chance to, strategize back and plan for the attacks. Back to you, Shavan.
Thank you very much, Ishan, for joining us on this broadcast. I'll request both of you to stay on. Just a final word coming in from General Panun. General Panun, what message does it really send across? Because, in the current situation where I call him as failed marshal, not field marshal, failed Marshal Asim Munir's attempts that are now being made. Do you believe that the Pakistanis are also now trying to change their approach? Because I believe in the last few days there have been some policy changes, anti-drone systems are being brought in. But along with anti-drone systems, their old tactic of sending in more Pakistani terrorists are basically increasing. So do you believe that that is also a change in their way of handling the situation?
Well, as far as Pakistan is concerned, they will continue to pursue the proxy war, obviously by changing the modus operandi. Sometimes, they send local terrorists, but this time you find that some of the SSG or Pakistan Army-led terrorists have also possibly infiltrated, and that is where you find the ISI handlers have been in touch with them. While they are also using technology where they don't get detected. But during winters, when the helicopters, we have armed helicopters, we have all the surveillance devices and the combat drone systems. I think all this put together will maybe teach the local terrorists that whether it is 24/7 or 12 months in a year, they will always face the pursuit from the Indian Army, supported by the locals and the security forces. And the locals are the ones who have understood the futility of playing into the hands of ISI and into the hands of Pakistan Army. In any case, I think in Pakistan itself, the way their field marshal that you're talking about, though has succeeded to usurp power, it is basically because why he has usurped power is because there is no support from people. So therefore, when the people have lost the confidence in their own military, the military tightens the grip on the people and have dragged the locals or local civilians of Pakistan into the military courts. I think this is the worst situation within Pakistan. And I think the time has come where internally Pakistan is going to be broken against the army And also, there will be no respite to the terrorists in India, whether
Right.
it is winters or summers.
General Pannu, a special thank you to you for joining us in a very short notice, and I can see that you're moving from one place to the other. So thank you very much for joining us on this broadcast. And also, thank you very much, Gursimran and Ishan, for joining us on this special broadcast of This Is Exclusive. That was a special report coming in from Jammu and Kashmir. That's all that we could pack in this edition of This Is Exclusive. Coming up trending with my colleague Rakshita.